All right, what are we doing today, boys?
Today we are putting a high flow downpipe in with a upgraded Shuenk IS38 Plus turbocharger that they so kindly sent us, and it should be a blast.
And we're doing what tune?
Well, after it's all installed, we're going to get it flashed over with the IE Stage 2 Plus IS38 file, which should make some jam. They claim that it's making about 420 crank horsepower, 475 crank torque, which it'll be a hoop.
And Zeb's freaking stoked. Look at the excitement in his eyes. And it's gonna sound sick with this titanium exhaust that we put on his car like 2 weeks ago. So that's what I'm excited about.
So you get an OEM downpipe out, boy.
Nice.
Get the last few drops in, you know.
Alright guys, so today we started the mission of swapping out a downpipe and an IS38 turbo in Zeb's GTI here. However, I think that there was a little bit of collateral damage when the OEM clutch came apart, and when we removed the street shield, we had a good amount of buildup there, and that caused me to instantly look up and see oil all over the bottom of the engine and the E-diff. I went ahead and stuck a borescope in the inspection hole, and sure enough, our rear main seal is leaking. So we're going to take the transmission down within this process and get the clutch off, get the flywheel off, replace the rear main seal, put the flywheel back on, make sure everything is looking good and doesn't have any weird wear or oil saturation, and button it back up. So all the wiring harness at the top side is just about disconnected. I've got to get this coolant line out of the way and disconnect it from the turbo. Then we'll start pulling these actuators, and I like to put little placeholders in the holes so that you don't get any debris in there. But this heat shield will come off, and then we'll be ready to start taking the turbo out. We've got a few things to take out on this side, but we're going to be taking out a lot more due to the fact that we're going to be removing the transmission too. So everything's going really well. No issues so far, with the exception of that rear main seal leak, and it should be a breeze to get everything rock and roll.
Darkness nearly drowned me. Sunlight burned my eyes. This valley is much too deep, and this mountain so very high. I gotta lay down here and rest, where I can take another step down.
Where we at, Ryan?
Well, we just got the E-diff out. Get it cleaned up and covered so we don't get anything in there. Nobody wants schmutz in their diff. And we're gonna keep ticking away at the turbo and get that guy replaced, and then get the transmission out and keep progressively going.
Are you taking the subframe out?
That's to be determined. I have a desire to, just because I like to get it out of the way, but at the same time, I don't think we need to with the Mark 7 and it having the steel subframe. And if you saw the other video with the Mark 8, we'll go into detail about the little differences, and we'll point it out more when we get this transmission pulled, because if we do leave it in, it'll kind of highlight what we were talking about. Alright, so got everything disconnected from the turbo. When I remove them, I like to take off the diverter valve, the inlet pipe, and the turbo muffler. because it makes it a lot easier to pull out. Lifting it up out of the engine bay is a lot harder than dropping the new one in, which all that's the diverter valve and the terminal muffler can be installed on it, and it's a breeze to get in. But when you're lifting it out, it can be a little challenging. So we're gonna get the last nut disconnected and start lifting. So it's gonna go back and then tilt and twist up, and everything should just slide out. Underneath, you wanna make sure that the wastegate arm gets up and around the oil return line. Otherwise you'll be fighting that, and it can be a real doozy because it's hard to see after you make this rotation. But from here, you should walk out without too much trouble. Just like that. And we have an IS-20. So the OEM turbos use a cast compressor wheel, and the Shuenk turbos use a billet compressor wheel. So they take a solid chunk of aluminum and actually mill the wheel out, and then it gets put in. It allows for much more precision, and it looks really nice. Naturally with the IS38, it's gonna have a bigger bore here, be able to flow more air. But on the exhaust side, let's see if we can get a good look here. We've got two pretty significant size turbines, and the IS38 turbine is a real worker. It can flow a lot more air out of it, and it still has great spool characteristics. So a lot of people don't want to go from the IS-20 because it spools so quickly. This is a very, very acceptable alternative that doesn't really dampen that effect too much. Alright, go inside the new turbo gasket onto this test. It's not kinked or anything. We've already got the new O-rings installed on all the coolant and oil lines. And oh, this guy got a little twist. Just a little down. Now, we've got the new turbo, and as I mentioned, we've got the goodies on it: diverter valve and turbo muffler delete that we put on. CTS one there. Make sure all our ports are open, so we're going to try to get those out later. And time to go in the same way it came out. Drop in the turbine housing gently and slowly, and just kind of wiggle it down. Now, once it does get down here, we do have the wastegate installed on there. It's just not fully adjusted. Tighten everything, but we want to make sure that it's perfect, which we'll go over. The oil feed line, or oil return line, I'm sorry. It connects to the bottom of the turbo, but it goes outside of the wastegate actuator arm. So make sure that doesn't get stuck in front of it, which is really easy to do. And if that happens, it will be a lot of fun if you've already got a bunch of stuff assembled and see that. Gonna go grab our new nuts. Now the Shuenk turbo nuts use a different method of locking than the OEM ones, which I will show you here in a second. The OEM one uses a retained crush-like washer that will keep everything in place and essentially lock the nut to the stud or to the turbo. The Shuenk ones use a much more traditional method of locking, which if you ask me, Alright, something that I think most of us know who swap turbos on these cars, or any car really. There's one important step that needs to be followed. And there's several pieces to this that we'll go over, but priming the turbo with oil. First thing, you fill it manually. And then after everything's done, before we start the car, we're gonna cycle it and let the oil pump run without fuel or ignition so that we get actual pressurized oil running through the turbo so the bearings are fully lubricated before they start spinning at a rate that can cause self-destruction. So first thing first, either get a little funnel or if you don't mind a mess, just pour it on. But you just wanna put a little bit of oil. It's not gonna take much at all to fill this guy up. And ooh, oh, we just made a mess. There we go. So that is full, overflowing actually. So we'll let that sit down and drain through the turbo a little bit, and we can pick back up. But it's going to be an imperative step to make sure that your turbo is properly lubricated when you replace it. If it's not, you could be introducing a time bomb situation. The feed line's connected. Well, I guess the hard line for the coolant is connected. We can get the heat shield on that line and the lambda sensor in, and we'll get a handful of things done and then switch back over to the rear main seal part. Now these lambda sensors are a little tricky to get to if you leave the heat shield on, especially so, but your best bet is a straight on O2 sensor socket. It's 22 millimeters, 7/8 of an inch, and for how tight these are from the factory, it's best to use a thin slot rather than the wide slot one because they will deform. And you'll see on them that they wear here and here, and they'll just slip right around the sensor. Heat shield back up. And here now, Robbie, stick your in there. Alright, so we've got transmission out, and this is our brand new, less than a month old clutch that is just covered in filth because when it was replaced, they didn't clean anything. Now this has led to a leaking rear main seal because when the clutch blew, apparently debris got thrown into the rear main seal, and that's definitely what it's looking like from this perspective. So we're gonna thoroughly clean the engine and transmission. And if you look down here, this is just not an acceptable amount of debris to be in here for several reasons. Not only is there a thick layer of cake in here that will need to be removed, and this stuff is thick, but it can get inside of our release bearing, and it already has started to. You can see how there's a coating of black here. I've been wiping it off a little bit, but that is not good. You don't want dirt and clutch material and debris getting into these sensitive bearings and seals. Otherwise, you'll have issues like what we've encountered here. So we'll get this all cleaned up, put back together right, and hopefully this will have a long leak-free life.
Yeah.
That's it, man. So
left all that.
Yeah, we've got all this clutch material built up in here, but that would definitely...
I mean, you can see metal shavings on the seal itself.
Yeah. So we'll get all this cleaned up and prep it for the new one. I'm gonna throw on the 034 rear main seal today. So the 034 rear main seal comes with a tool, which probably works just fine. However, I don't trust it because it's a little flimsy. So get yourself an OEM tool. They're cheap, they're effective, they're reusable. You sit onto the crankshaft like this, because this seal has to kind of straddle the crankshaft. The inside seal sits out against it, and the outside seal is in against it. You just shove it on there. It'll flip the seal backwards, which completely negates the seal. And just like that, we've got your main seal on. This guy should pop right off. So when these get put in, you need to put them in hand tight and basically do a star pattern to try to keep everything even. And as you tighten it down, you'll see the seal kind of move towards the engine. And then when we do our final tightening sequence, they're tightened to 9 Newton meters, which is next to nothing. Do not yeet these on. These bolts will snap, and if they do, you're gonna have a bad time. Last night we got a lot of things buttoned up. The subframe is back on, transmission's in, everything's all torqued down, axle's in, downpipe in, and really it's just buttoning up some odds and ends at this point. Getting all the oil refilled after replacing the rear main seal. A good idea to do because when you scrape that gasket, you can get some in there and you don't want that hanging out. But I'd say in the next hour or two, we're gonna be firing this sucker up and having some fun.
What's next?
Yes.
Yes.
I've got to put some coolant in it because when we swap the turbos out, we disconnect the coolant lines. Get that all filled up, topped off, and then completed as we do our initial start. But prior to that, we've got to make sure that I've got the wastegate adjusted properly, and you can get close on the bench. The IS38 wastegates are a lot easier because they're spring loaded and they'll hold the wastegate flap shut, but the IS20 wastegates aren't. So you can use, well, a little bit of might because it takes some force to move it back and forth, but you can get a good range of it and make sure that it reaches the full close point and opens enough where it can release pressure. But ideally, we're going to be somewhere between, and we'll go over this shortly, with a 3.2 to 3.68 volts on the wastegate, and with that, it'll give it a full range of motion and accept the adaptation when we reset the parameters for where the wastegate is located, so the ECU knows how to control it. Assembly oil burning off. Making sure we don't have any weird leaks or anything going on, but everything from what I can see is just the oil evaporating off the turbocharger. Now we're gonna go ahead and get this thing hooked up to our battery tender, and then we're gonna go ahead and get the flash put onto the ECU. Voila!
pretty simple. Can't make it do. That was fast.
That's the stage 2.
IE likes to keep things fast.
Flip it on to the bottom of the.
Fucking shit.
Turn your traction control off, bro.
Fuck. God damn. That is a lot faster.
IS38 life.
Shit. I don't know where else we can go.
Well, ideally, you can go somewhere where you can play in fourth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty quick.
Moderately. Jesus.
What the fuck was that?
So far.
Well, the little bit I got to drive the car before the engine tried to jump out through the fucking grill, it was pretty good. I liked it. But of course, then like shit hit the fan, and you know. But now we're back, and we'll see. Allegedly, Ryan has beat on it pretty good, and he said it's good to go. So we're gonna give it a shot.
All right. How is it?
I was going so fast, I was fucking scared. like after I passed you, I immediately had to like start hitting the brakes. I was like, oh no!
I know. All the sound went away before you got to me.
I was like, oh no, I gotta stop. Like, it's coming up so fast.
It sounds really good though.
Oh yeah, I fucking love the way it sounds.
Titanium exhaust for the win.